say test every spirit. So it means if you're testing every spirit, it means you have to test even the Spirit of God. It means there's a particular level of personal independence that you have even to test the Spirit of God and approve it and qualify it as God or to reject it as not God. Now, that compulsion is the place where now any person, if God does not go and take over somebody's free will, then why would a person do something that even God himself cannot do? That begins now to become the problem area. So Mackenzie may have taken advantage of his followers, but to some degree you see there's an aspect of influence that is normally now termed as brainwashing and leading now into the cultism and such.
Now, even as the talk for regulation, rages, I want to know from you.
Yes.
For someone like Paul Mackenzie Ntege, previously we've had cases of, men of cloth, or guys who regard themselves as men of cloth, even here in the capital, being accused of, conning their followers to the point of hiring people who would pretend they're sick and they get healed during live church services. Should we regard them as the same?
We can't regard them as the same. We can't regard them, or should we regard them as the same, or
yes,
in terms of,
yes,
we should regard them as the same, of the same kind, because it means somebody is beginning to become shrewd in a different way. It means they're not, somebody comes in the name of a man of God, but is shrewd. But you see, at the same time, every kind of market is sustained by the clans. If somebody tries to do something and then there's no clans, it means that shop will close. You see, you can be very objective and say this business will boom. If I can manipulate people like this, they will boom. But the thing is, most of the times, we need to really have ability to see the subtle force that is operating. For instance, people talk about, let's say, the corruption in government, isn't it? It's very easy to point the finger and say there's corruption in the government, but the corruption you see in government is the exact reflection of the corruption in the masses. Technically, there cannot be corruption in the government if there's no equivalent magnitude of the same corruption flowing in the masses, because these are the same masses that we relegate and they begin to become government. So that which you see in the government is exactly the same thing we see in the masses. So if we change as the masses in terms of our corruption standpoint, then eventually there's no way the government by itself will become corrupt. So the same thing that is happening in the church, it means if you're corrupt in our being in terms of godliness, it means the way the universe is designed, it will give you the same corruption that because you have to be gathered in the corruptness of your being. The more you're not corrupt, it means you'll be able to perceive. So sometimes it is not just, we have to understand the subtle forces that are taking place. Now, if that is taking place and somebody is a con man and such, and how exactly will you regulate them in advance? How exactly will you say somebody is doing this and such so that you can stop them before they do? You realize it is something that you have to wait for, because you don't have even if you want to prosecute somebody, you will be asked for evidence. What is the evidence? You cannot just suspect. And from the suspicion, then you're able to really prosecute to the end. Then how people come maybe into the place of serving God. This aspect of church and God is something that is so vast, and that's why you see, when we talk about God, the aspect of church and such, it means you see in church, every part of church, they're talking about the devil. So it means there's activities also that's called demonic. And that same place, you cannot talk about the presence of God without acknowledging the presence of activity of the demonic that is seeking also to have influence upon the souls of men. So it is a battle that carries different facets of levels in terms of how we are going to deal with it. So the law ought to deal with things as the law. The moment somebody breaks the law, it means he has to be held accountable legally. And the other part of the propagation of the kingdom of God, people have to be in the place of really staging up. Because one of the things, like for instance, when people are dead unto God, I call it relativity, the theory of relativity. You can speak in terms of God and trying to give masses guidance, but because they're equally blind, so you'll appeal only to the dimension of their heart. One of the things that we are not really answering in terms of when you're talking about this concept about Mackenzie and such, what exactly is in the heart of men that Mackenzie was appealing to? So you see, even if you just try to blanket it and not appealing to that, it means you're not really answering that. It means there will be the same suppression. You'll be actually dealing against that inner evolution, because these people are seeking for a leader that will tell them, I want to meet God.
That begs the question.
Yes.
Are we too desperate? Are people too desperate to the point of being convinced to do such things?
It's not really too desperate. There's the desperation part. The desperation comes because of the lack of providence. You see, every kind of human being that is anchored on the concept of God means they are seeking transcendence. They're not seeking for a dead philosophy. You cannot talk about God and then there's nothing that you avail. Because you see, like for instance, the same preaching of the God concept actually is the one that births atheism. Because people will look at what you're talking about God and such. So most of the time people think about, somebody says an atheist, they think an atheist is anti-God. An atheist is not necessarily an anti-God. An atheist is somebody that is seeking God a different way, that he has not met the threshold of the person that's arguing for God. So you see, if I'm on God's side, I'm saying I'm an apostle, I'll be irritated against an atheist. But question is, this atheist is not just atheist because he's anti-God. This atheist is an atheist because the leadership that is claiming to have the custody of revealing who God is not meeting the threshold of what their heart is seeking to be answered. So now, I can come because I'm an apostle and being proud and such and just saying, blanketing, suppressing what your questioning is. You see, so for instance, like you can come and begin to ask me questions about God and then you begin to become irritated. It means technically I'm not really answering. So it means at the end of the day, I will not convince you about God. So it means if I'm the one who is an apostle and I'm a custodian of the concept of God and you're a common man who is answering questions that an apostle that claims to be in relationship with God cannot answer, what will you do? It will be that the same desperation that will cause you to morph and find something that you can anchor on, because what is seeking answers is not anchoring. So you see, we can come together as men of God and try to just bias our own selves vis-a-vis the mass, but you're not necessarily answering the question that is in the heart, that people like Mackenzie came into place and began to appeal to that inner desire for a transcended contact with the realm of God.
Okay. Apostle, the exhumation exercise continues. Yes. Resumed yesterday because it had been stopped because of adverse weather conditions. And the CS for Interior, Kindiki, said there are more graves.
Yes.
And termed this, whatever Mackenzie did, as an well-orchestrated and organized crime.
Yeah.
Now, even as we grapple, in trying to find a solution, a remedy to all this mess, I want to take to just use what Rwanda did as an example. Rwanda closed down over 700 churches, and they said, for you to have a church, for you to call yourself a pastor, you must have done a bachelor's degree in theology and have valid religious certificates. Over 700 churches were closed down. First of all, do you think that is the right way to go, and should we as a country try and implement that, try and go that route?
No, it's not the right way to go. You can talk about Rwanda. You see, sometimes when people talk about things, they blanket it in terms of this. There's what is, for instance, let's say the common man argues vis-a-vis about how they observe the church, and it means it pains them, it makes them to become irritated. Then there's irritation. Sometimes situations compel or push such kind of measures to be put in place. It doesn't necessarily mean every kind of thing has got its pros and cons. It has got its kinds of loopholes and such. It's not necessarily the right way to go, because question is, for instance, when somebody is saying that, let's say the concept about people talking about cults and such, then let's say, for instance, somebody like there's this guy called Yesu Tongareni. Yes, it's a very strange kind of concept. But you see, Yesu Tongareni was here before Mackenzie. Okay, in the limelight.
Yes.
Now, when Mackenzie comes in place, people begin to talk about Yesu Tongareni. And the question is, how do you really peg such kind of a guy? Because it's not, you see, you're talking from a place of superstitious fears. But technically where this person is, he has his own right, because you cannot say there's no provision for him to make those kinds of claims. When you look at technically the reality of spirituality. Now, another question is, let's say, the concept of church. this education part of it in terms of bachelor's degree and such, it guides, or let's say the knowledge or the education of it. The interface of education in it, it helps somebody to have a balance. You see, for instance, any person that graduates, the terminology that is used, you have been given powers to read. When you're graduating, I tell you, now we give you powers to read. It means you have the ability to at least understand the human society so that you can balance yourself. It is not the university that, have you ever seen professors that are fools? It is something that is called education by itself, but technically, somebody can go through that and you can sit down with somebody that's a professor and you can say, still a professor is a fool, but it's because that is the system that operates. So it means it still has its own kind of pros and cons. So the part of church and such, and the dynamics that are involved, which university will train somebody like, for instance, the people that believes in casting out demons? The same part of the church, there's a part of the church that you can go to, maybe let's say their theological college, and they tell you this kind of thing, seeing casting out devils is not biblical. There's even doctrinally just every kind of church. So which exact university are we talking about? Because the same time, if you say now we have to deliberate and have university, means even the Mackenzie kind of people say we have our kind of university, isn't it? So it means you still have to regulate what kind of knowledge, because it's not about the universities and the degree they have. Somebody can have degree. I saw another time people wanted to have introduction of witchcraft into the university and such, isn't it? So it means, so technically it means if you are a witch, we need a witch with with at least a degree and such. So it's not the issue of the degree or such, is the issue of the outflow of this concept of the God, whatever. This other part of being learned, it helps at least in terms of having the corporate understanding of where the world is at now, to have development, that you have holistic kind of human development as a shepherd.
You know, they say it is a calling. Being a man of God is a calling and all that. And the reason as to why I cited Rwanda is because if you look at the history of Paul Mackenzie, Paul Mackenzie was a taxi driver in Malindi. And some of his old friends in the taxi industry who spoke to the media said he did taxi driving for some time, then decided to open the church. And they also joined the church because they wanted to support him, because they felt like, okay, now you can go to church. He's our guy who's running this church. But it got to a point where they, started having, different feelings about Mackenzie, because some of the teachings, some of the, if I can refer to the believers as that, is one, that there's no need to go to school, that they should ban the academic certificates. Now, that brings me to my question. If at all, we cannot, if for lack of a better term, judge or, certify men of cloth based on, their studies and all that, what can we use? Because I can decide today that, you see, nowadays they say, especially in the country, the fastest way to get rich is by starting a church. Because of, many pastors lead very, 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 very successful, luxurious lives. How do we gauge a pastor who's true and, and differentiate from someone who's a quack or someone who's leading, quote unquote, like a cult, like Paul Mackenzie? How do we draw the line?
First of all, I want to tell the masses, stop wanting not your pastors to have luxurious lives. This deficiency, you see, it's a witchcraft by itself. Have you ever seen even the same society, when somebody prospers and they become billionaires, we don't like them. It's not just church. It's like there's the heart of man that does not want people to succeed. Question is, how have you succeeded? There's some pastors who are living a luxurious life, and you'll be surprised, not because of church. Okay, when somebody says the fastest way to become rich is to start a church, please show us, because I'm equally in that space, isn't it? I want somebody to come and say, I will prove to you, and start a church on that basis to prove that point, because sometimes it's talks. It's very few that comes in forms of quacks and they're able to like that, and you'll be surprised they don't go too far, you see. Now, then you talked about now Paul Mackenzie being a taxi driver and such. Look at even the concept of the church concept and such, the way it starts. There's fishermen involved. The fishermen, Paul himself was a tent maker. Now, in those times, a school was a person. you come under a person, and the entire kind of concept of your schooling will be under a person. And it means you are regulated in that place. Let's look at this kind of concept, even like somebody like Moses. It's not an easy walk when especially come to the God concept, because Moses in his own self had an opportunity to oversee an annihilation of the entire Israel. The people he has come telling them God is coming to remove you from this place to take you to a promised land. In the middle of the road, the same God tells Moses, get out of my sight, I want to destroy the entire Israel. That was a scandal in brooding. It was a cult, it was a potential interface to become a cult. Now, what exactly does Moses do? Moses has to stand that place and has to ground God. So you see, that elevated state of transcendence has a lot of things that can throw somebody out of balance. Because the way somebody says, God spoke to me, education is evil. You can be sure, if you are keen to observe what that statement is, you have to validate it and at the same time know how wrong it is. Because maybe somebody is coming to a concept of saying the way conceptualization of the human soul is, the education system the way it is not according to the divine blueprint, because it has to have particular kind of errors. Because you see, part of the divine concept of God is, if God was to relay the schooling concept, there would be no natural born failure. Every school will produce a success. So somebody can come in an ideology of saying, I've gone and I've met God, and there's this particular kind of an idea we need to inject in the school system. But you see, because you're so emotional, you see, even our school system, every single time it's being reviewed, they change education system, the CBC and SAC, they come to a place, they investigate it. It's the same kind of thing. It's like hearing God. They're equally hearing God and saying, no, we want to make it better. But you see, they're not utilizing from the emotional dimension and say, let us burn papers and such. It's actually, what we're seeing reviews in the education system is the exact thing that Mackenzie is doing, but now it's coming with a spiritual connotation, coding God. But every kind of thing that is taking place in development is reviewed, structures are made. So question will be, if Mackenzie believes he has had God about the education system, say, we have this far, we have come this far, so I have this kind of an idea, come and tell the education CS and tell, I have this particular kind of an idea concerning the school system, because even this BC system, the way it was being developed, I was met by a person in a restaurant. I was having a date with my wife. Then the person that was in charge of that came and started interviewing me and went extensively and started talking about their education system is supposed to be reviewed to allow those particular kind of things. So a man of God has been interviewed by somebody that's involved in that. But now when it comes to the place of like emotionalism and not understanding phases of maybe refining the concept that you're trying to say, and then saying everything is demonic and such. Even, you see, what you fail to understand is even the medicine that you understand today, initially, maybe the way it started, it didn't come that easily. It was something that's called pharmakia, all this kind of thing that was forbidden scripturally and such, but eventually we've adapted it, all of us, isn't it? So the interface of saying, I've heard God, and understanding where you're at, you cannot manifest all divinity at once. Life is life in progress. So people like this need to come to a place of where they can be stabilized in this kind of concept of what you say, the transcendent dimension, saying, I've heard God. What exactly, how do we really, is there a council of people that have mastery in the word of God to help you interpret that word, to tell you, as much as you've heard God say this, is not going to happen this way.
But Apostle,
yes.
Even as we wrap up this conversation, as you began, you said, we'll be surprised in the future.
Yes,
we'll find more cases.
Yes.
But they say once bitten, twice shy. Are we supposed to, now, because you're not supporting the regulation of churches, like many other, and there are also men of God who are saying we cannot, hold all the churches accountable, the entire religion accountable because of a few people. They need to be held accountable individually. But the government must do something because, as well, if in 1994, the late President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi did form a commission, to look into matters religion, and in 1999 they recommended, because they said there's the cultism is growing at a very fast rate within schools and within the society, and some recommendations were made, but still close to 24 years later, we still are having such issues. So as you wrap up and you give us your parting shots, what do we do? Because I agree with you to some point that we cannot hold the entire church accountable. People need to be held accountable on individually, but we cannot run away from the fact that we need to put measures in place
True.
to curb such cases in future. What do we need to do?
Now, the human psychology is a very complex thing. For instance, let's say regulate churches. It means we're not just somebody like me saying no. It's not just about saying, no, you're talking the wrong thing. It means we have to come to a place of conversations and begin now to air these views where we're intellectually objective. For instance, you say once bitten, twice shy. There is a lot of things that is taking place in terms of, let's say McKinseyism. You can think you're anti-McKinseyism, technically, when you actually been hooked on McKinseyism, being there, you see, like the other side of the same coin. You see, a coin operates the same way. You may think you're anti-McKinsey when not knowing you've been made McKinsey unknowingly because of how you reacted to the state. So it means you're blocked in particular way of conversation. So you see, so you cannot say you've really escaped being a McKinsey. So it means to escape that means very objective, like the surgeon's scalpel that separates the soul, to really objectively plant the necessary realities to people come to a place of objective, because something can be done. Let's say, for instance, if the church concept is a true concept in terms of religion, somebody can see that, and there can, from that point in time, they can be totally closed. You cannot have any conversation with them regarding church. Do you think that they will have been saved? It means they have been hooked on the same thing. It's like somebody saying you're in love with somebody, then you hate them. You see, hate is equally a relationship. So it means that will keep you drained. You'll be deploying a lot of energy to sustain the hate. So there has to be something to be done, because the moment you begin to have this kind of conversation, the law will be refined, objectivity of societal existence will be refined, men of God will be refined in terms of like what exactly is the void that we need to supply. Because if we just think, well, much of the masses, they are equally blind. As much as people are talking, people are blind to the truths. They are activated by a scenario and a moment, but they are not having objective ability to have foresight that will help them to see, so that we're not surprised in future. So there has to be that objective reality of settlement, build up, men of God also to see into a place of saying, we as men of God, we need to begin to appeal to this thing that is seeking in men, so that we do not just bash this thing and not necessarily providing the hunger that's the heart of men, so that we equally metamorphose or equally evolve to another dimension of really supplying what the masses are seeking and the masses are empty for.
Well, Apostle, this is a debate that will continue
yes.
to rage on, even as the exhumation of bodies continue in Shakahola, Kilifi County. But clearly, there are issues that need to be addressed.
True.
But thank you very much for coming this particular morning.
Yes.
We hope you'll be here again to, of course, help us understand these things clearly, because matters of religion are very, very sensitive. It's a very, very sensitive matter, and the same men of God,
yes.
like you, do provide us, do guide people, thousands of people across the country who are believers. They say Kenya is predominantly a Christian nation. That means majority of the population are Christians, and as it stands,
yes,
many people stand and they're like, I've met a lot of people, by the way, when I go out to do stories, and they're like, I'm not sure about going to church anymore. So clearly, it has created some sort of, doubts in believers, and something really needs to be done. Be it, I don't know if the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops and, the entire clergymen in the country now need to come down and need to sit down and understand, if, like, what is where do we stand? What needs to be done? And of course, engage with the government and the authorities to understand clearly the way forward, and in order to avert such cases in future. But thank you very much for joining us this particular morning. We've come to the end of this conversation here on the Morning Drift. It was a conversation surrounding matters of the church and the law, and of course, we are looking forward to the commission of inquiry that has been mandated by the president to look into the Shakahola massacre, as well as the task force that has been selected, of course, led by Reverend Mutava Mwisimi and the likes of Bishop Makariuki, to, of course, look into the issue and, of course, give legal recommendations and governance changes into matters religion in the country. Thank you very much for joining us today. I am Ian Keitany, and until next time, which is tomorrow, we'll be again to talk with, of course, I'll be joined by Simba Charles Leza Kege, just to bring you up to speed on what is happening across the country. But remember, you can still follow up and go to our website, www.lookuptv.co.ke, just to get a view of the stories that we've done for you and what is happening across the country. Remember as well, you can join us at exactly 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 7 and exactly 9 p.m. On our bulletins to understand what is going on across the country as the hours fly by. Thank you very much. Do yourself a good day and God bless.